Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Four Direction. It's a weekly program that I host leaders from around the world to discuss global issues. Our topic today is the woman representation in the unity government in South Sudan. Last week the president has issued a decision to form 8. Right now is 9 governors out of 1 woman. Only he appointed Sarah Cleto Hassan for Bahr al-Ghazal state. It came on a time, and there is a hashtag in social media and a general conversation in the state of South Sudan that there should be 35% of women represented in the government. So I'm joined by guests in the studio who will be discussing more about the topic. And I welcome all the viewers who are watching us now. And please send us your suggestions, your questions, so that we can follow up and be able to answer. So my first guest is Jacqueline Nisiwa. Jacqueline is joining us. She is the director for Center for Inclusive Government, Peace and Justice. So welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you, Apollo. Thank you for the viewers.
Okay. My second guest is Catherine Erona. Catherine she's an advocate and a human rights activist. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So first, I will start with you, Jacqueline. How are women in the public street of Juba and the other state receiving this news?
Thank you, Apollo. I think when we heard and saw the decree that is appointing the governors for the states, and we saw that out of the 8 currently appointed governors out of the 10, only 1 position was given to a woman. And out of the 3 administrative areas, the special administrative areas, none is a woman. And for us as women, we were really surprised, but not amazed that women are left out in this transitional arrangement. Prior to the appointment, women have been lobbying a lot and advocating for the 35% quota to be respected by the parties, and they committed themselves that they are going to be giving women the 35% representation. This was also enshrined in the amended constitution, which is the transitional constitution of South Sudan, and the 35% is reflected in that amendment. So when the appointment of the governors came out, we were just like, what is happening? What is happening and what is not happening that women are not doing for women to be left out in these transitional arrangements for the appointment of the governors. So most of the women were actually saying like, no, this cannot go like that. And we started assessing which are the parties that have not respected and committed to the 35%. So when you see women have started campaigning Muswan Wen, which is a simple Arabic word like where are the women? So it's not that women are not there, women are there, but where are they in the governance arrangement? These are the questions that women keep asking. And South Sudan has a lot of potential and capable women who can lead as governors, who can lead as ministers, who can lead in any other structure and institution and level of government. But I think the nominations and appointment is deliberately leaving out women to be part and parcel of this transitional arrangement and in implementation of the peace agreement. So women are disappointed. Women are disappointed at all levels. However, with the one and only female governor we have, Honorable Sarah Cleto, you could see when she arrived Juba International Airport, more women went to give solidarity to her. And there were positive comments from the women like, yes, she is the face of the women and we need to support her and we need to ensure like she brings peace to not only Western Ghazal, but also like to be an example to other states to embrace peace. So women are very disappointed, I can still say that. And women are still hopeful that in the remaining probably 2 governors, there could be 1 woman to be appointed. And also we are asking His Excellency the President to review his appointment and to ensure that women are in these state level governors. Right now, the deputy governors are not appointed. And women are already saying we need at least half of the deputy governors to be women so that we can compensate for the losses we have with the 8, with the current 10 governors where women are likely to miss and only have 1%, which is like 10%. One woman is 10% of the 35%. So we would like to see that there are more women in the state governorship, and even in the state parliament, women have to be there. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm bringing Catherine. Talk to me more about the article in the Constitution 144 for the Republic of South Sudan. It talks about 35% representation for the women in South Sudan. And this is the equity, the historical challenges and problems that they have been through. Talk to us more about the article.
All right, thank you so much for this opportunity. You know, in the agreement, actually, the Article 144, it confirms the establishment of the affirmative action, which was actually mentioned in the Constitution, in the Transitional Constitution of South Sudan, Article 16(4)(a). So it actually ensures that the affirmative action, 35%, to ensure women's participation in the government, equal participation in the government, will actually be monitored and will actually be worked on. So basically, I can see that it's a reconfirmation of what was actually mentioned in the mother law, which is the Constitution of South Sudan.
Oh,
yes.
How can this government an institution address this article to the citizens of South Sudan?
Well, you know, in the Constitution, the 35% was mentioned as an affirmative action to assist and help women to build their capacity and also to be equally represented in the government because of their high needs and because of how they have actually played a vital role in bringing out this country, South Sudan, during all the times of war and all the times of conflict. Even those who did not actually go to fight, they were actually facing a lot of challenges and conflict back in the country, whether it was in Juba or in Khartoum or in the diaspora. Women were actually facing a lot of challenges as a result of the conflict that's taking place. So this 35% was put in the Constitution to us to enforce the need and the commitment that the government said, okay, you women, you have stood side by side with us, and you have really worked hard to liberate this country. So now this is your share. But it's actually a minimum percentage. It's not actually like, it's to help the women build their capacity and come up to a certain standard in which they will be equal with the men in terms of capabilities and in terms of capacities to hold positions in different institutions. And then from there, the equality starts itself. So you understand what I'm saying, right? Exactly. Yeah. So with the national, yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, with the transitional government, it has to take place in the new document, just to reinforce it once again and to say that, hey, as it's mentioned in the preamble in the agreement, that this is taken from the constitution and we are going to observe it and we are committed. We're committed. It's written in the agreement, in the preamble. It says that we're committed actually to make sure that women are represented in all the institutions that are established by this agreement as a 35%.
So I'm coming back to you, Jacqueline. What do you think the problem? Why we are still having this problem and we are talking about this issue?
I think the issue of affirmative action is a slow and gradual process. One of the challenges is that this agreement specifically said for women to participate in this governance arrangement, they have to come from political parties. And one of the challenges we have is that some of the political parties have not had their grassroots, I could say, elections and registration processes that could bring in new women to join these political parties. Some of these parties are new. Majority of them who are in the peace agreement now join in from like 2013 and 2016 and then 18 moving forward. So you find that in those parties, most of the women in the grassroots are not aware of these political party manifestos. And as you know, you have to tell people what your manifesto is, what you stand for, and people will get registered. The second issue is that the political landscape seems to be militarized, whereby you have to be a general, you have to be in the military, or you should have fought some wars for you to be able to be promoted and join the governance arrangements. So when you look at some of these people who are appointed, at least they had a history of being in the military. And majority of the women, they have been in the military, but they are not in the high ranking in the military. So that leaves majority of the women to be out. In those parties that have at least foundation and ground, I could say that since the conventions were held like 2008, that was the SPLM convention, and I think it's the only party that held conventions. There were no new conventions held where new women can join. So we have known that initially South Sudanese women were marginalized. Few went to school because of the conflict and also because of customary practices where some families and some cultures were barring women from going to school. But this narrative have changed. Like since 2011, from the independence, South Sudanese women have gone to school. South Sudanese women have had their own role models in the country. Like, for example, if you are looking for role models, you cannot fail to find women who are in politics already. We have the Honorable Vice President, Mama Rebecca Nyandeng. We have Nunu Kumbas. We have Honorable Audeng. We have many, many women who are already in the political spaces. So South Sudanese women don't lack role models who can help them to move forward. The challenge is that this has to be connected. There should be some connections. So all women have to work together to ensure, like, you pull one and the other one pulls another, and all of us get into those spaces. So I could say that there are many South Sudanese women who are educated, but they are not in the political spaces for the reasons I've given. So if women are to come from these political parties, and then not many of them will be appointed because they have not joined the party ranks. For example, for you to be in the party, you have to undergo in the system, be in the maybe political bureau, or you have to be in the state conventions or at the national conventions, and then you can be appointed. So most of the strong women have not yet join those political
and
parties.
how
to be
can
able
they break these political barriers to be part of the government decision making?
One of the things we advocated during the negotiations is that women should not be discriminated in participating in politics because of political background or social affiliations. The rights of women as enshrined in the Constitution, Article 16, says women have the right to participate without discrimination. And our preamble in the Constitution also says South Sudan is based on foundation of justice and equality. So when we are saying for a woman to participate, you have to come from a political party, that is already a violation of the women's right to participate in governance. So that is something that the political actors and leaders, and particularly the RT-GONU, has to see that women are not discriminated based on those political backgrounds, because even the political parties have not moved to the people and to the women. Majority of the women are in the communities, and these parties have to go to the communities rather than staying at the national level. So that barrier has to be broken, and South Sudanese women have to be like, if you are willing to serve and you are competent, you can apply and you should be appointed without saying you have to be from party X and B. That is one of the weaknesses that the peace agreement brings towards emancipation of women. The other issue is the cultural issues that bar women from participating in politics. And that comes from the family of the women. You find that some parents or some husbands may not allow their wives to join politics. They consider politics to be a dirty game. And sometimes they consider that if your wife or your daughter joins politics, she's going to be spoiled. And this narrative has to change so that young people and even women who are competent are free to join political parties, are free to join governance without being restricted by their families, that is husbands, or by their parents. The other issue is that we need to create awareness and consciousness for women so that they become conscious that the development of the nation and also the governance system needs women. Just as we were for the referendum, and today is our Independence Day, I'll say that Happy Independence Day to the strong women of South Sudan, because the independence came with majority voters as women. So if women are the majority voters during the referendum, why are women not majority in the governance of this country? And we know that most of the households in South Sudan are run by women. Women are the breadwinners in the families. And worse of it now with the COVID-19 situation, where even those patients are kept at home, women bear the largest burden. So I would say that women have to be made conscious that they have the right to participate in governance and to participate in political processes for this country. And foremost in also implementation of the peace agreement. So that awareness has to go down so that women don't just think that, oh, we are just meant to be in the homes, caring for our families, caring for our children and looking after our farms, or going to the market for end means.
So when you talk about the awareness that should be under the ground, who's supposed to be involved, or who is responsible for doing this work?
I think it's the responsibility of all the actors. And I could say that the political parties, you know, if you're a party, you should make your party attractive. You don't wait until elections and then you start coming campaigning like, vote for me, vote for me. when you have not even made your party attractive for people to join. So I'll say that the political parties also have the right to go and create awareness for the women so that the women can join the party, the political parties. Another important stakeholder in creating awareness is the civil society. And I think civil society have been doing this a lot and creating awareness for women. But I also think that women themselves have to create awareness through women groups. Like we have different women groups and coalitions, networks. So these groups have to go on the ground and create more awareness to women so that women become more conscious of their rights and their duty as citizens to participate in these spaces.
Catherine, talk to me about the role of the legal groups that are in South Sudan, who are working in the field or who are outside Sudan. What is their responsibility to address this issue, like in a national level or international level?
Sorry, I actually thought you were talking to Jacqueline. Sorry.
No, that's the role of these legal groups to address the issue in a national level or internationally.
Well, I think first of all, when you're dealing with a certain scenario, it's like you actually want to create awareness in a certain community or in a certain group of people. You actually have to make an assessment of the capacity, their mental capacity, and their ability to understand what you want them to understand. So you have to look into how do they understand this best, because you want the best results, and how can you actually make it easy for them to digest your ideology, to digest what you bring to the table. So, for example, you cannot be a political personnel or a legal personnel and start speaking the legal language or start speaking in big terms to people who's or to a community who actually may be the highest academic level would be, for example, a senior graduate or a P8 graduate. So you actually have to do an assessment of your audience and assessment of the community that you're trying. So I think the first step would be that you break this, these laws, you break these documents into an easy language.
I can hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. You can continue.
Yes, please. So I think the first step is that you break these documents and break these laws into an easy language for everyone in the community, all the communities of South Sudan to understand. And you actually, and the targeted group here is the women specifically. So you have to make sure that these women understand the language that I'm speaking. One, two, you need to see what time is best for them. For example, you have women are very busy. When you go to the communities, they're very busy because, as Madame mentioned, Jacqueline mentioned some seconds ago that they're the breadwinners in their families. So they're actually busy. Some of them go to the farms, some of them are busy to fetch water and all that. And you need to find the best methods. Maybe it's a radio program, or maybe some small sheets, or maybe interviews or questionnaires for a category that can actually write and understand. So you have to categorize the community, and you have to find the best method to bring the thing. So I cannot go as a lawyer, for example, and then go to a simple group of people whose understanding of law is very basic, and I start talking to them about the transitional document, and I say Article 144 and all this. It would be much easier for them to understand if I tell them that, do you know that you have a right to do this and do that? Do you know that as a woman you played a very important role in bringing this country, in liberating this country? Do you know that your voice counts? Do you know that it's very important to raise your concerns? Do you know that it's very important for you to understand your rights in the Constitution? Do you know what is a Constitution? You know these basic questions, okay? And it's very important for us to follow up with them, not only ourselves, that are they following the procedures and the steps that are taking place right now? What is happening in what has been happening in Addis since 2018 up to now 2020? Probably they're hearing governors being appointed, and now they're hearing that women are not being well represented. But where did it start? Were they following? And who was actually there to make sure that these women
who is responsible
are following
here
the process?
for giving the information out? How can they follow up what is going on?
I think I actually support what Madam Jacqueline just said, that it's all the actors. And I would add that it's all the actors and all the stakeholders in this process, all the human rights defenders, like the lawyers and the civil societies, all the international organizations that are working within South Sudan, like the UN Women, for example. And I see that they have a number of documents that address these issues. I'm not sure about other activities that they're doing to make sure that it actually goes up to it reaches all the communities and all the targeted groups. The women groups like the South Sudan Women Coalition and the South Sudan Women Bloc, yes. All these are actors and all these stakeholders in this process, where it's a collective responsibility of all the academicians, all the women who are educated in the country, to help out fellow women to come up and reach to their level so that we can all move together. I think that would be the best approach.
Okay. Jacqueline, I'm coming back to you. So there is, to implement the 75%, there is saying that every state has to make sure when they are choosing their minister or their government, their minister, in the state level, they have to make sure that they implemented the 35%. What should be done in case of that? Especially from the civic society organization, to make sure that each state have the representation of 35% in the women in the government, in the state level?
Yeah, I think one of the steps that civil society can do is to lobby and advocate and remind the governors that when they are appointing their cabinet and probably the state parliament, they have to ensure that women are there 35%. One of the challenges we have in this appointment process is that it's not public. So you will not know that you are going to be appointed, or so-and-so is going to be appointed. There's no vetting process. So the best we can do is to remind the leaders of the state that when you're appointing, please make sure that they are women. One thing that they keep saying is that we don't have women, but when you look everywhere, there are women. So it's not that women are not there, but it's just to remind them that we need to have women in the state government. And we also need to be monitoring. For example, like what happened with the state governors. Prior to that, as I stated, we made a lot of statements. Women spoke and called for the 35%. So when it came to the opposite, that women have not made the 35%, women still made statements. So we'll continue to advocate, and we'll continue also to monitor to ensure that women's quota is given to the women. So we are not saying that we are giving up, even if they don't recognize that women's participation is key. We have to keep reminding them that we are here, and South Sudanese women are here at all levels. And in fact, the states have more women than at the national level. So it shouldn't be an excuse that there are no women. And actually, the state governors should start thinking of more than the 35% for women to be in the state government and also in the state parliament.
So when you talk about that, are you thinking about the younger women also in the society? How can you involve them and empower them to be involved in the leadership or through their activism, and then they can be part of the decision making in the government? Which kind of program can be done?
Yeah, if I can speak of what we do at the Center for Inclusive Governance, we have the Young Women Leaders for Peace. And this is a small group of women that we mentor to be able to participate in the peace process and also in governance. And these women, these young people should have a voice in decisions that affect the country, but also in decisions that affect them as young women. We recognize that in most cases, when we are talking about youth in South Sudan, and when you call for youth meeting, you'll find that maybe out of 20, only 2 are women. So we are also encouraging that we do more of mentoring for these young women so that they can be able to participate in these processes. The second thing that we can do is to mainstream the participation of young women in these spaces for discussions. Like if we are having awareness raising on the peace process, if we are having dialogues on women's participation and leadership, at least a quarter or half should be given to young people to be able to participate in these processes. Mentoring them also on leadership skills at the earlier stages is important. Like we realize that building confidence of women at earlier age to be able to speak, to be able to participate in public affairs is important, rather than waiting for women to start, coming up and start finding the challenges that they will find in these political spaces, which are mainly dominated by men. So preparing them to become leaders is important as we move forward.
So, Catherine, I'm coming to you this point because I know once you have done a lot of civic activism work and you were once a scholar abroad. How can young women like you get involved in this process?
Well, I think it depends on whether you're a freelance or whether you are a part in any of the institutions, or maybe you have your own law firm or you have your own business or something. I think it starts with the sense of responsibility that you are actually a member of this community, you're a member of this society, and you are a good citizen of this country, and you actually, you have, all of us as South Sudanese in the constitution, we are vowed that we are going to work towards the betterment of this country. So I actually encourage that we all realize the potential that we have and start working with it. As a lawyer, let me say, I in every opportunity that I find, I try to defend the human rights violation that occurs in front of me or in my office or any of that. And also any opportunity that we find or I find as a young woman for a capacity building program outside the country or within the country, I try to share with friends, I try to share with fellow women, and I try to participate myself in such programs to build my capacity to make sure that you are actually following up in the situation. Yes, because I think one of the issues of the young women or the young people in our country or generally is that sometimes we don't pay attention to these things. We feel like, okay, let me wait until I'm maybe 35 or 40, then I'll start thinking about these things. It's not yet my time. I have to enjoy. I basically think that yes, you can enjoy your life, but once you're 18 above, I think you are a member of the community and you have a responsibility towards it and towards making it a better place for the next generation, I guess. So yeah, all the programs for young leaders in the country, all the opportunities that are coming. So yeah.
The best way, how do you see this program, like for the upcoming 10 years, how it should look like, where people should be given training, what kind of potential, what kind of accessibility that they should use so it will be effective, that will take them to the market work as well?
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry. So
sorry. I have a baby here, so, with the coronavirus and everything. Yeah.
I go to Jacqueline and come back to you. Yes. So,
All right. Yes.
how do you see the design of this leadership program for the upcoming 10 years from now?
Well, I see that few years ago, it was actually 2013, 2014, and up to 16. I realized that there were a lot of programs for young people and a lot of opportunities, and it was really powerful and it was very active until things went a little bit down the road with the war and the conflict and everything, and the country's situation shifted from developmental status into an emergency or humanitarian status. So it actually affected the young people because most of the organizations, international organizations which are within the country, or even the local organizations, shifted their priorities and their mandates from developmental programs into humanitarian assistance. So most of these capacity building programs were put on hold, and that had a very big negative impact on the young people, and specifically on the young women.
Oh, okay. Jacqueline, I'm coming back to you. In the issue, we have 2.3 million refugees and we have IDPs. Especially right now with the COVID-19 pandemic, there is a lot of challenges that women face in their household, taking consideration the sexual violence, the abuse, the physiological stress. There is a statistic that said each one hold in a week, like in the refugee camp in Uganda, they face physical stress in a basically week. So in the absence of women in the government, like who is responsible to address that issue in the local level and in the general level? If we don't have more voices in the government to address the issue in a highly level, who should be addressing these issues?
One thing I would like to say is that for the refugees, they are under the authority of the host country and also the authority of the UNHCR. And we have also like refugee groups in those camps who are trying also their best to do more awareness on issues of sexual and gender-based violence, awareness on COVID-19, and also like to raise the human rights issues that happen in those refugee settlements. And I think I'm familiar with the ones in Uganda, and particularly also in camps like Jumani, where sometimes we visit, we have programs there. So you find that those issues of sexual and gender-based violence are tackled by the settlement commanders in those refugee camps, and the police, which is also enforcing law in the camps inclusive, are also trying to address some of this violence against women in terms of the COVID-19, but also in terms of the settlement in the camps. However, we also feel that a lot need to be done by the government to make sure that there is peace in the country so that these refugees can come back and start living a normal life. And the protection of South Sudanese everywhere is also the sole responsibility of the government. For example, we have seen some countries where they still have influence on how their citizens live abroad. And I think also the government of South Sudan need to be taking up that responsibility in ensuring that South Sudanese who are in the refugee camps and are displaced or who have migrated to other countries because of the conflict are safe in those locations. Coming back to the issue of the IDPs, I think we have a larger number of IDPs in both the protection of civilian sites and those who are settled within outside the protection of civilian sites. And they live under horrible lives, and violence in those camps also is very high. For example, sexual violence against girls and women in those POCs and IDPs is very high. and protecting the women in those POCs becomes a challenge. For example, if you take with UNMISS, where communities can start fighting because of maybe dowry or because of marriage issues, and lots of lives will be lost in that. And maintaining security and all this becomes a challenge. So the POCs and the IDPs are still the responsibility of the government to ensure that women and girls are protected in those areas. We have the Vice President, Mama Rebecca Nyandeng, Her Excellency, who is in charge of social welfare, gender, and youth. So the protection of women falls within that cluster. And we ask her to give more authority and power to make sure that in the sitting of the Council of Ministers and in the sitting of the presidency, issues of women are raised, particularly sexual and gender-based violence, which is prevalent now with COVID-19, and in areas that you could not expect that this evil is happening. For example, rape of 8-year-old, rape of 4-year-old, rape of 18-year-old. So young girls are really a victim of the situation of COVID-19, and they have suffered sexual and gender-based violence. So the vice president in charge of social welfare and gender youth should be speaking up for the protection of women in this area. I will also say that the issue of sexual and gender-based violence is a security issue. So Interior Ministry and Defense need to take it up to ensure that women are protected, because some of these violations happen and they are caused by men who are either uniformed or men who are holding arms when they are not even regular soldiers or in the military. So this is a security issue, which is a threat, and it has to be addressed by the security institutions of this country. The other institution that can protect also these rights of women is the justice institution. The judiciary have a big role to play in ensuring that justice is granted to the victims, and also perpetrators are held accountable for committing these violations, especially sexual and gender-based violence against women and girls. Citizens also have a big responsibility, and the communities. I think the traditional leaders, they have a crucial role in maintaining law and order in the communities, but also in ensuring that communities live in harmony and women are protected. So sexual and gender-based violence should also be approached from an angle of a community response to addressing this verge. Most of these violations happen in remote areas, for example, or in areas which are not easily accessible by these law enforcement agencies. And communities are the close ones to the victims. So they should be able to provide some safety and also identify some of the perpetrators who live within the communities so that they are apprehended and held to account for this. So one key thing is the community approach to addressing this sexual violence, and then other things will come and fall in place. And finally, I could say that the Ministry of Gender and Social Welfare has a crucial role in ensuring that issues of women and girls are priority. And already the Minister of Gender has talked about the need to establish or operationalize the sexual and gender-based violence court. And I would say that there should be more efforts and support towards making sure that this court is functional and women and children are able to get justice.
Catherine,
Yes.
how can we take this story out and the narration of these challenges, the domestic violence? How can we address it?
The issue of our country is that the enforcement of the law is a bit not in place. And I also always say that we're one of the countries that have the best laws. So if you take a look at the Constitution, if you take a look at the Civil Procedure Act, the Criminal Procedure Act, you'll find a lot of provisions and a lot of articles that actually protect the rights of women, protect the rights of the citizens, and actually ensure their security within the borders of the country. You see? So the issue is just the enforcement of the law. And I would say that the enforcement of the law is a problem in our country because at situations like this, it's very hard to apply law at a time of war or conflict. That's the biggest issue. Law is always enforceable where there's stability in the country and where there's peace in the country. It's very easy because all the bodies and the legal agencies or the enforcement agencies are actually active and are in place. But it's very hard under such a situation because you wouldn't actually know which body or which institution will properly take the legal procedures into place and will actually address violations and crimes as mentioned in the law, and will actually set and put out
hello.
So be it the judiciary, be it the police stations, be it the county courts and all these legal agencies and enforcement and law enforcement bodies, is very hard at this time to enforce the law. But we have the provisions, we have the laws, we have the constitution, and it illustrates and actually enumerates all these rights and all. Yes, and all the punishments that are there in the law. Is just a matter of enforcement.
Okay. Thank you for all the viewers who are watching us. We still in our program for direction. Today we are talking about the representation of the women in the South Sudanese new unity government. Jacqueline, I will go back to you. Tell me what next. What is the last stage that we should be doing to make sure that these women will be represented in that?
I think one issue that we need to address is the participation of women in the political parties. We need to identify women who are already existing in those political parties, and also identify women who may wish to join political parties and build their capacities in terms of building confidence in them, giving them some skills on being leaders, and also empowering them to be a voice so that they can be able to advocate for their own rights and also for their own spaces. The other recommendation that I can say is that the political parties need to really recommit themselves to the realization of the 35% and make sure that they empower women within the parties to be able to participate effectively in those spaces. As women's groups and activists, I think that we need to have a unified voice. Already we have seen that in the different women groups that we have, the networks, different voices are coming in regards to the participation of women in the 35%. And that is not helping us as women. So instead of us helping ourselves so that we push for the 35%, we should not be helping the men actually to marginalize us more. So I will say that as women, we need to have our common agenda and our common understanding and goal of where do we want to be as South Sudanese women in the governance of this country and in peace building and in ensuring that South Sudan is prosperous. So it's our role as women to have that unity for a purpose rather than having different views in regards to the women's participation. And finally, I think that the security of women remains paramount. Without protection of women against sexual violence, without protection of women from further displacement. And as my younger sister, Catherine said, there is likely to be a breakdown of rule of law. And if there is breakdown of rule of law, there's going to be more chaos, and women will not be able to effectively participate. So women need to have that conducive environment and space so that they can actively participate without fear in these governance spaces.
Yes, as final words, I would love to say that, according to the Constitution.
The last thing, and how the future will look like for you. The last point, and how is the future will be look like for you.
All right, I would like to say that good news is that in the transitional constitution of South Sudan, as amended, it actually states in the Bill of Rights that all the citizens of this country, all the citizens of South Sudan are equal. So when we say all citizens, we mean that men, women, youth, children, and all the citizens of South Sudan. So in the first place, we didn't actually have to fight for this or push for this, but because of the many violations that we see that's happening against women and not being well represented in the institutions and in the government and in the society, that's why we're actually pushing hard, and that's why we see a lot of women organizations and other local organizations and human rights defenders are actually pushing towards this. Though our rights as women is actually protected by the law, it's protected by the transitional constitution of South Sudan. It's also protected by international laws like the CEDAW, which is actually ratified by the national government of South Sudan. That the government of South Sudan will observe and respect all rights of women, and all women, all the citizens of South Sudan are equal. So I would say that your right has to be taken. If you feel that your right is aggrieved, if you feel that you're offended, you actually have to take your right. That's when the law will actually support you, and the law will actually stand by your side. So I want to send this message to all the women and all the organizations that are defending the rights of women in South Sudan and outside South Sudan, that they should actually continue with that, never give up, push until you get your right. And the other thing is that it's mentioned in the Constitution that in Article 16, that the affirmative action for women is 35%, and it's also reconfirmed in the agreement for the national unity. But one important thing that I really want to point out to be observed is that 35% is an affirmative action. It's actually a minimum percentage for the capacity of women. So in any situation or in any institution, if you appoint women and you feel that there is still more women who can fulfill more positions and it's getting more than 35%, you can say, oh no, I've actually done what the Constitution says. It's now 35%, even though there are more qualified women. No, I'm not going to appoint women. The rest of the percentage is for men. No, it's not like that. It can be 35%, and it will be even more than 35% as long as there are qualified women that can fit in those positions. 35% is the minimum percentage. That's what I really want to reinforce. Yeah.
Okay, thank
Otherwise,
you.
thank you so much for hosting me. Thank you so much for giving the women of South Sudan such a platform to discuss our issues.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the viewers who are watching us, and thank you for my guest. Our topic today was women representation in the unity government of South Sudan, as the president has appointed 9 governors for the state. Only one of the appointed governors was a woman. I was joined by Jacqueline Misiwa. She's the director of Center of Inclusive Government, Peace and Justice. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Catherine, for the great panel discussion with you.
Thank you. Catherine Aruna, she's also an advocate and a human rights activist. Thank you, Jacqueline, for joining the program.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the viewers.
Thank
Hope
you.
to touch base again. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Okay. So we reached the end of the program for direction. Our topic today was women representation in the unity government in South Sudan. Please follow us, follow my Facebook page for direction, the YouTube channel for direction, Instagram and Twitter. My name is Mary Apollo. I'm the host of For Direction. We'll be live with you every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Please keep sharing the topics, send your suggestions, your questions, and everything you have until I meet you for the next show for a new topic to discuss and talk about. I would like to say Happy Independence Day to all the South Sudanese who are in South Sudan and who are outside the country. Thank you for watching. Bye.